I actually got into real estate by accident. Um, so I was running my own business, and so I started my own business, my own, in running my own business, it was in like the turbulent times of COVID.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was focused on trying to reduce the amount of risk that I was incurring by running my own business. And so the way to do that was to take a look at my two largest monthly expenses, which were my living expenses in terms of my house, lodging and taxes. So in that process, I started to research like what would be the best ways to eliminate these two expenses or at least drive them down. And it all came back to multifamily housing. So I ended up selling my townhouse that I owned in like a nice like suburban town of Maynard. And I was like right on the bike path and we liked where we lived. It was, my girlfriend and I at the time, she's now my wife. And so we agreed to sell that house and buy a multifamily that we could live in for free. And so that's how I got involved is I ended up, buying that house hack. And then throughout that process, I started listening to more podcasts. I started listening to Bigger Pockets more frequently. And on Bigger Pockets, one of the biggest things they would talk about is like, you got to get acclimated. You got to get kind of, you have to build connections in your local market. And so they were, pushing the kind of local WREI or, local meetups, things like that. And so, I went onto the Bigger Pockets forum online and I tried to kind of figure out like where are there local meetups in my area. And so, I kept coming back to the Worcester meetup. And so I was like, I'll just go check it out. So I went and checked it out. I was actually super nervous. I did not feel like I was going to fit in. Like through it, like neither of my parents went to college. Like I'm a blue collar guy, like through and through. And so when I attended the meetup, I was expecting to walk in. Everybody's like in suits and briefcases and big time heavy hitters. And like, what the hell am I doing here? And so I showed up to this meetup and it was like a mixed bag. There was some of that. There was some more lax. And I talked to 3 people the first meetup I went to. 2 of them I'm now partnered with.
Awesome.
One of them being Andrew, and then one of them is one of our close friends as well now. So I started attending meetups, and what got me interested in buying more or buying so rapidly was my undergrad was in finance. And one of the main reasons why I went to undergrad in finance is because when I was 18, my parents filed for bankruptcy, and I didn't quite understand like why they were going through such challenging like financial implications. And so my main prerogative was like, I need to become financially literate or like this is going to happen to me or could happen to me. So it wasn't so much so that I was interested in going into working in the sector. It was more the fact that I wanted to become intelligent in the sector that I felt like had the most impact on your ability to prosper, regardless of which industry you intend to work in. And one of the things that I learned was sort of how macroeconomics works and in regards to interest rates and how that interest rates impacting businesses, unemployment, variables like understanding the sliding levers, understanding if interest rates go up, what does that do to spending? What does that do to business growth? How does that impact global markets? When interest rates go down, what does that do to businesses, hiring, unemployment, growth, local markets? And what I very adamantly understood during COVID was that they lowered interest rates to the floor and they started printing money pretty prominently. So when you look at increasing the money supply by 20, 30%, and then you look at interest rates being dropped to the floor, what that told me was that basically asset prices are going to the moon. No two ways about it. So basically your options at this point are collect as many assets as possible or get left behind. And I saw the writing on the wall. And so I very quickly realized, like, I literally, like, F everything else, work 7 days a week, as many hours as possible, and buy as many assets with as little money out of pocket as I could in a short amount of time as possible. And it's like, if I don't do this, like, I'm going to get left in the dust. And like, people who didn't do that are now pissed because they're living in the ramifications of that. And so that's kind of like a long-winded explanation as to like how I got into real estate and like what prompted me to like be so passionate about the pursuit of it. But I think that I looked at it as, I need to pursue this thing relentlessly, or I am going to end up in a very similar circumstance where I'm playing from behind the 8 ball for the rest of my life. We
have 2 economic operation guys on the show. Are we recording? Yeah. Wonderful. Zach, welcome to the show. Welcome to the show.
I can barely live my life without thinking I'm being recorded anymore.
That's awesome. Well, thanks for sharing that.
Yeah.
Yeah, Harrison does our operations as well and is very into the levers of economics. You were definitely hitting a chord there.
Yeah, now it's all bullshit. You ever read any Austrian economic work?
No.
I could give you some good books.
I love it.
Yeah,
I'm super into that kind of stuff.
They will definitely just take a giant dump on Keynesian economic theory and how the world works now, and tell you why it's all fake.
Okay.
And propped up by manipulated interest rates and manipulated money supply, and why if you hold assets, it's great. And you know, as a real estate guy, I kind of feel sheltered from a lot of the negative impacts of these policies. And, you know, sometimes you're like, oh, well, I kind of like my asset prices are going up, you know, selfishly. You know, I like learned some of this stuff at a really young age, you know, like 18, 19, I studied econ. Got really into like Ron Paul in like the 2012 presidential run. And this is like, he talked about sound money and sound economics.
Well, I think that what's kind of interesting, and I don't want to go too far off on like a side tangent, but like, you know, one of the things that I kind of look at is that there are pieces in between of this equation, but like you have really like the post-World War II era where you increase, you know, industrial productivity dramatically, and that fosters a wave of growth. And then you have like really thereafter, you have kind of the women's rights movement where like they are kind of advocating for like, you know, women should be equal, women should have jobs, women should be in the workplace. And then you have kind of the .com thereafter. And then you have what these things all have sort of, so, and now in modern day, you have the institution of AI. And so what I think is really interesting is that what these things have in common is that the US has been really fabricating growth for a really long time. I think that if you look at like the industrial boom, like that is really the crux of where growth stops for the most part. And that when you start mandating dual income households, right, to foster higher earning potential, to foster price increases in a declining population, like really what's actually happening is you don't have the population growth to support true natural growth. So what you've done is you've now painted this image that we're going to go from single income households to dual income households, and this is going to fabricate this wave of growth. And that this was pitched to society as like the woman, like equality for women, where in reality, I think it's at the detriment of families. I think like a lot of kids are suffering because parents are forced to work 2 jobs and then they're raised by like, a nanny or daycare or something like that. And that's why I think we're dealing with such like profound like mental health crisis and things like that. But really where I was, my premise of why I brought this up is that I think that it has such an impact on the US is trying to instill a narrative that forces growth because the US as a whole, like the ecosystem is like growth at all costs. Like that's literally the epicenter of what the US is. And so I think that this has been going on for a really long time. And then I think they benefited from the .com boom and all the like the tech stuff, like that kind of bumped it up a bit and kind of made it so that we weren't really exposed to that period of instituting dual income household or mandating it. And then now we're propping it up again with the use of AI. But I think that what is great about this is that I think that when you see the institution of AI, I think you're going to see that the quantity of jobs is going to decrease dramatically. And I actually think that it will correspond to higher pay rates per job and fewer jobs. And then we'll actually auto correct back into single income households and it will actually kind of auto correct all this like mental health BS that we're dealing with right now because like kids are raised by like staring at paint. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Interesting.
Yeah. Super side tangent, but
No, it's cool.
I think there's a lot of truth there. The future is probably the most uncertain. It's like, because you have to because like, it sounds like you understand this stuff at like a really high level, or at least you have a very like a strong desire to, and not necessarily because you can always you could do something about it, but because like, okay, well, I can learn this so I can shield myself and my family from the things that could happen should I just remain willfully ignorant. But you have to get people to not become willfully ignorant.
Yep.
But people are numbed with drugs and
so how do you fix that? Yeah. How do you get people to not be willfully ignorant?
I mean
that I don't know. I mean, my answer is probably not kosher.
We'll let you go second.
I think that division of community is the epicenter for dependence. And I think that what has essentially happened is it starts with division of the household and dividing people into, forcing both parents to go to work and then dividing them from their kids. And then it comes into, things like institution of social media, reducing extracurricular community events. Everyone's at home watching Netflix instead of going out to social events, participating in extracurriculars, going to sports, so on and so forth. Interacting and, community fosters positive mental health, right? And I think that this is also the death of religion as well, in regards to, death of going to church, having a community, having a social circle, helping one another. And I think that when you kind of eliminate that, I think that it sort of, that is the crux of what has infiltrated sort of this negative kind of animosity, pessimistic kind of combative nature of the community and sort of treating people like their enemies. And I think that reinstituting the importance of community, I think is paramount to there not being this perpetual downward spiral that's currently going on. And I do think that one of the ways that can happen, though, is through reducing the overall amount of work that needs to be performed through implementation of AI and through reducing the amount of jobs so you can get back to single income households, so you can get back to having more community and have kids who are actually raised by their parents and instilling values and things like that. Like, I think that's the direction of where we need to go. Will we get there? I mean, I don't know, right?
It's always going to come with a lot of sacrifices that people don't really want to make right now.
Yeah.
you know.
I heard that we should go sign up for kickball or soccer, go get in the community, have some fun.
Something you can do is just put yourself in, like, there in I'll get the time period wrong if I try to specify it, but like in more recent like people used to not live in cities, and then over the past, like, call it 100 years, living in cities became like what it became what you needed to do to find success, and then it became like now you grow up in a small town, you go to college, you go to work in a city. Like, that's like, there's this big cultural push to put young people in cities. And I think cities can be great, but I think it's a great place to live really close to a lot of people and not know anyone and become really fractured and have sort of build that society that you were kind of describing. But what you can do is you can remove yourself from these large cities that have no soul and put yourself, not to say like you need to live like in a field, but like put yourself in a more in like a smaller, more cohesive area where it's a little bit more easy to access some of those some of those things that you were describing.
Yeah, I agree wholeheartedly.
Yeah.
Get to the roots. These big cities that have no soul.
I mean, they don't anymore. It's not like I think New York City can be great. I think Boston can be great. I think there's a lot of great things about cities, but I think you just you have to be aware of the trade-offs and sort of some of these negative aspects. And if you're not aware, and if you just like want to go to the bar and drink every night and numb yourself and do things that like are very low time, like a very high time preference, engage in high time preference behavior, then you'll miss it, and then all of a sudden you'll be halfway through your life and you'll be nowhere, and you'll wonder why. Yeah.
This is the deepest episode of WREI Talk Radio.
Yeah, I'll get your number and send you some interesting.
I'll definitely read it
on all this stuff.
So it started with bankruptcy, seeing that, wanting to find a way out of it. You've kind of fell into real estate.
Yeah.
Learned a lot more about economics, finance. What do you think the next 5 to 10 years look like for you?
Oh, I mean, the thing is that the hardest part's already over. I think that it's really hard in the beginning to preserve capital, compile resources, get into the game, execute with proficiency, see material upside and grow your liquidity. And I think that we've already gotten to the point where that is sort of proof of concept. And then we start implementing, building infrastructure, building a team, building connections with other investors in the community, and getting to a point now where it's like we have this huge network of people who help facilitate our growth. We have a great team of people that we rely on. I think that Andrew and I have really focused on trying to provide incentives to our team to make it so that they do not have sort of a capped earning potential. I think we've started implementing EOS, which is the entrepreneurial operating system, where basically you figure out what your intentions are for the company, work backwards and kind of create checkpoints, and then kind of create goals for your team. And then your team is sort of rewarded monetarily through achieving the goals. And I think that, that plus kind of what Andrew alluded to earlier with hiring the external consultant, building the org chart, things like that. Like that stuff has been instrumental. And I think we've already laid the framework. Like the hardest part was getting from both having W-2 jobs and having, maybe one or two staff, right, in 100 units, to quitting W-2 jobs, having a 20-person organization and, and 300 units. Like, I think that was the hard part. So like, I think where we're at now, and we have a lot of flexibility to be able to have more of an aerial view and kind of be more strategic about kind of pinpointing areas of weakness, like identifying where in the organization do you need to put more intentionality, where, how are we going to structure compensation to make sure that you retain high quality talent? How are you just in general systematizing the hiring process, right? Andrew kind of alluded to this in regards to utilizing personality testing and then identifying an avatar that meets the personality that you need for a specific role. Like, I think identifying how you are going to execute with a uniform sort of matrix that can be repeated, I think is integral to scaling.
Yeah, duplicatable, replicatable, scalable.
Yep.
Absolutely.
And
What was your business before this?
I owned a strength and conditioning facility in Needham, Massachusetts. When I was in college, I was working my first 2 years of college. I was working at Dunkin' Donuts, and I was working like a full-time job before I would even go into class. So like, I would wake up in the morning, I'd go work at Dunkin' Donuts at like 4:30 in the morning. I'd get done around 9, and then I'd go into class. And so like, I would work a full-time job, go into my classes, take my classes, go home, take a nap, do my homework, yada, yada, yada. And then I'd had like a couple side gigs that I would do at night where I'd make some extra cash as well. And when I was, I got to a point where I was like, man, I'm spending a lot of hours for not a lot of cash. Like, there's gotta be a way where I can like kind of hone in some skills that I have and like make some more money doing something that's like more skilled labor. And so I pursued getting my training cert to become a coach. And I built out like my own training business when I was in college, going to people's houses and doing personal training. It wasn't like super, super lucrative at the time, but it was something I was passionate about, and I could double up how much money I was making. So I ended up, when I graduated, I applied for fitness positions and I applied for finance positions, and I got a couple offers in both. And what I realized is like, I was like, there's a means for me to earn probably 20 to 30% more in fitness in year one if I'm a top performer. And so for me, it was basically, are you willing to bet on yourself to create an additional 20 to 30% upside from an income standpoint? And, understanding the benefits of compound interest and things like that. Like, I'm like, listen, the more cash I can get my hands on today, the more impact that's going to have on me getting to where I want to go long term. So I'm willing to take that gamble. And if it doesn't work out, the worst case scenario is a year from now, I just go apply for a finance position, which is what I would have done anyway. So I'm like, what's the downside to that? Right. So like, I just toss a year in the wind and then figure out where I land. I'm like, I think that's probably the move. So I ended up going that route. I ended up becoming a top performer. I ended up making probably 30% more than I would have had I started in finance based off of that. And what was interesting is I was working for a health club called Equinox, which is like a really bougie health club.
Nice club.
Never been in one. That's how I know it's really nice.
And what I will say is that what was so cool though is that like all of the people who were paying me to coach them were all basically some of the most high income earning individuals in Boston, right? So all of my clientele are just extremely high performers. And so it resulted in, I was getting paid to like network with people who were really, really intellectually sound.
Yeah, great place to network.
Yeah. And so I built this whole network of people and ended up separating from them and just opening my own gym. And I retained a lot of those connections. And, I will say that I would say that a handful of people that I met during my time at Equinox, I probably made at least a handful of people over $1 million each for people that have invested in deals with us.
Nice.
That, now are contributors to what we do.
Dude, getting fit physically and financially.
Well, what's funny is that like these people paid me to coach them, and then I'm assuming that now I've made them more money than they spent on coaching over the years. So it's like they got coached technically for free,
Right.
and got all their money back,
Right.
just by working with me. So it's a good situation.
Hopefully it's a little more. Hopefully your coaching wasn't $1 million.
Yeah.
You better be in great shape.
Yeah, I think the fitness industry can have a lot of it kind of like, you don't necessarily think of the fitness industry as being an industry where you can, like, it doesn't always, like, when you think of like high financial success, you more think of finance, right, than something like the fitness industry. But I think there are, I mean, like, you've obviously, like, what you just said is proof. And I'm sure from like just your experiences of being in that industry, that like actually it's kind of like painting, like there's a lot of these like things that don't really sound sexy on the surface that people think that you can't really make a lot of money at. Like, oh, I'm a fitness instructor, and someone who's in private equity, may look at, they're like, oh, okay, and they don't really understand how. No, like, oh, just because this is unsexy, I actually can make like 3 or 4 or 5 times what I could have made if I had gone into a more, what you would think it sort of looks a little more successful on the surface.
Yeah.
So Alex Hormozy, who I don't know if you're familiar with, he comes out of the gym industry, and I mean, he gets a lot of hate, whatever. I think his content's really great. But he's kind of another example of like, he built this massive gym business and sold it. And, then, I mean, he's not in real estate, he's in other ventures, but, and also like, it's an industry that, like, if you're a high performer, it builds a lot of discipline.
Well, I think that's the bigger thing, is that it lays all the framework for the intangibles needed to be successful in any industry.
Exactly.
I think it's like so first off, like, when are you coaching people? You're coaching people when they're not working. So when are they not working, right? Early in the morning or late at night. So you're rocking split shift. So like, if you're doing that, right, like, you got to wake up real early and you got to be able to work late. So like, it creates this mentality of like, you have to be really disciplined in order to excel in that field. And then you start thinking about like just executing like your own kind of fitness side of things. Like, you're going to the gym, 6 days a week. What is that like? Nutrition's got to be dialed in. Like, there's a lot of variables. And so I think that the amount of intentionality that it takes to be committed to fitness, committed to your nutrition, and work split shift is a huge time commitment. And so I think that what it does is it kind of creates this, really regimented structure where you become really capable of it teaches delayed gratification in a big way. And then you take that and then bring that into the real estate sector, and there's a lot of commonalities.
Yeah.
Right. Like, you're taking, in multifamily, like, the business plan is pretty cookie cutter, right? Rinse, repeat, rinse, repeat, rinse, repeat. In the same way that showing up to the gym and working out is pretty rinse, repeat, rinse, repeat, rinse, repeat. I also think that, I mean, I could go on for a long time about this, but I just think that like the intangibles you develop in the fitness industry have a lot of tie-in to what's asked of you in real estate.
100%. You've got to do things to lay the foundation for those, like you said, those intangibles that you're going to need that apply across industries.
Yeah.
Real structure is actually freedom. Real structure is real freedom, because now you're you can quiet the mind with what am I supposed to do and let it fall into a routine that you can. What was that military book that we
The
Extreme
Jocko,
ownership.
yeah, the
Extreme
Jocko,
ownership.
yeah.
Yeah.
I'm also ex-military, by the way.
Thank you for your service.
Yeah.
What branch?
Army.
Cool.
Yep.
How many years?
6.
What'd you do in the Army?
I worked in supply. I mostly did inventory on equipment and made sure that nothing got stolen, and then dispatched stuff, and then collected it once it's done being used, and make sure that nothing went missing, which obviously tends to work well when you it's a very high attention to detail kind of meticulous nature,
Okay.
which I think ties into meticulous monitoring of a large portfolio, which is kind of aligned with the ops side of what I do now.
Yeah. Yeah. Of all of your experiences, kind of the 3 that we've talked about, what do you think has been the biggest bag of tricks that you can pull from for the company that you're running right now?
So I would say that what I learned in my finance oriented education is definitely has the most impact in my ability to understand and identify opportunity in real estate. But I also think that some of the non-industry specific intangibles that are needed to be successful at the scale or at the pace or scale that we are actually tied to sort of like a operating principle that I've adopted from like a very young age. And I don't know how if you guys are sports people or not, if you're familiar with Kobe Bryant. So there's a
LeBron
famous
James.
yeah, there's a famous interview of Kobe Bryant when he's like in his late 30s where they kind of ask him, you're kind of getting up there in age, Art, and how do you think you're going to fare this upcoming year? There's a lot of young talent coming up in the league, and how do you feel like you're going to be able to compete against some of these younger players? And then later on in the conversation, they also kind of alluded to and asked him the question pertaining to, why do you take so many shots? He said, why, a lot of people call you a ball hog. Why do you take so many shots? Why not, create opportunities for other people? And his response was, I wake up at 3 a.m. and I train, and then I eat, and then I watch film, and then I take a nap, and then I train, and then I eat, and then I watch film, and rinse, repeat. And by the time he gets to the end of his day and he's mapping out the hours, he's training 4 times a day on average, 5 times a day sometimes. And the point that he makes is he said, these young players, are they more athletic? Maybe. Are they more skilled? Maybe. But what he said is, I've been in the league since I was 18 years old. I'm 35 years old. I've been in the league for 17 years. And I've been doing this for 17 years. So the average NBA player wakes up at 10 o'clock, watch a little TV, trains once a day, right? And then that's it. And so the point that he makes is, okay, so I am training on average 4 times more than the next person. And I've done it for 17 years, where these people might be 23 and they've done it for 5, right? Because when you're in grade school, you're not doing that. When you're in grade school, you got to attend school, you got to attend class, you got to do homework, right? So the point that he's talking about being a pro. And so the point that he makes is he said, in 5 years of being in the league versus my 17 years of being in the league, he said, I have practiced 3.5 times as often as you in years. And then I am practicing 4 times as often per day as you. So I have put up 12 times as many shots as you will put up in your entire lifetime if you continue doing what you're doing right now. It's indisputable why I choose to shoot the ball. I've simply done it more times than anybody else. So there's the best chance of me making the shot over anybody else. The point that why I bring this all up is that Elon, who is a controversial person, has a very similar mindset. How did he grow Tesla to be where it is right now? It's through ridiculous amounts of time commitment. When you're comparing him putting in 18-hour days, 7 days a week, compared to the average, it's like, let's look at the average employee or average person in the workforce. Average person works 40 hours a week. That's a standard job, Monday through Friday. So if they work Monday through Friday, right, 40 hours a week, how many of those 40 hours are actually deep work? Meaning no coffee breaks, no showing up late, no effing around lunch, yada, yada. I'm saying actual work.
60%.
Okay. So now we're looking at 25 hours, right? So what if you put in 14-hour days, 6 days a week? You're at 84 hours. And what if you did actual work for 84 hours? You're looking at your 5 times the work of the average W-2 employee, right? So look at that over a year, over 3 years, over 5 years, right? Why have we been able to achieve what we've been able to achieve in the time frame that we have? It's because I'm waking up at 4:30 every single day, 5 o'clock every single day, starting work immediately and working for 12 to 14 hours a day. Like, that's the reality. And what I'm saying is, like, those intangibles, they don't shine through in year 1. They shine through in year 5, in year 6, in year 7, when you're still doing it. And I think the point is that this is the single factor that has had the most profound impact on us achieving what we've achieved.
So if you were talking to somebody who is looking at you saying, man, super inspiring. I want to take a step and maybe get to where you're at. What do you think is the first, if you could point and shoot somebody in the direction to help them achieve similar results to you, what's one like tangible thing that you'd suggest that they implement?
I think set a regimented routine to wake up as early as possible every day. I think creating a checklist of items that are preventing you from moving on to the next step. So what are the current things that are preventing you from moving on to the next hurdle? You're trying to achieve something. Great. Write down all the things you need to do in order to get to that, over that next hurdle, and keep that list with you. As the day goes on, there's a lot of chaos that happens. You get interrupted by tons of people. You get interrupted by colleagues. You get interrupted in our sector by banks, by inspectors, by staff, by a million people. And so you're not always going to have this uninterrupted workflow. And in what we're doing, it's the opposite of that. So it becomes really important it's really challenging to stay on task, or it's really challenging to switch tasks abruptly. And so when you get distracted or you get pulled in a direction, I think that having an ongoing list of action items that impact these things need to be done in order for me to move on to the next level, I think that is paramount in order to stay grounded in what is most important for you to continue pushing the ball forward. So I think waking up early, creating a checklist of action items that move the ball forward, and I think some semblance of continued education and some semblance of committed time to networking. So I'd say those are probably the 4 pillars for me that I think it's like, if you're not devoting time to networking in your industry, you're holding yourself back. I think if you're not I think those are really the things that I would advise, that if you're looking to get started, right? How are you going to be able to get started and kind of make meaningful change and meaningful impact? Yeah, I think you got to commit time to education, commit time to networking. I think you got to wake up really early so you get more hours in the day than anybody else. And I think that you got to keep an ongoing list of what needs to be done to move the ball forward.
That's awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show. Why don't you let everybody know where they can find you? I'll put your info in the bio as well.
Sure. Yeah, you guys can find me on Instagram. My handle is at the 1099 mindset. So that's my Instagram handle.
Nice.
And if anybody who's looking to kind of work together or pair up on opportunities, Andrew and I, we provide equity for anybody that brings us a deal. So you don't need to have any experience. You don't need to have any money. You just need to bring us a deal. So if you guys want to make some money, reach out to Andrew or I, and let's work together.
Right on. Thanks everybody for checking out the WREI Talk Radio Show. We will see you on the next episode. Brother, thanks.
Thanks, man. Appreciate it.
Thanks, man.